Hello! Welcome to a Theorycrafters guide on team building in Genshin Impact for version 3.4. The idea here is to hopefully break down team building to 36-star spot or even speedrun Spiral Abyss in as simple a way as possible, because very often when I run into accounts that are struggling, it's not actually an investment problem or character problem, it's team building problem. To put it simply, that is the most common thing I run into. So I'm going to teach you guys how to build some teams. So the way we decided to go through this is we are going to explain the idea as there's a core. These are the two units that are center of your team and the way define the way it plays. There's your flex characters. You're either going to have one or two of those and an on-fielder. And they are built around having an ideal reaction, and sometimes that reaction is no reaction in the case of crystallize or monopyro comps or monocryo comps. So in those cases, I'll be referring to it as pyro swirl, because that is technically an ideal reaction. You're not playing 4 pyro characters or 3 cryo characters. So the first thing we're going to define, because it's very simple, is an on-fielder. Each on-fielder will have a preferred team core, but it gets murky because the on-fielder can be part of the core. The examples that I have here are Eula Rosaria is basically the center of most Eula teams. Wanderer Farazan is the center of Wanderer teams. On-fielders are typically paired with cores because of their energy requirements, a need for reactions to do damage, receiving buffs from a teammate, so Wanderer Farazan, Rosaria Eula, in both of those cases, and can essentially be any character of your choice. There are a couple examples I have here. Hatham, typically played with Nihida and an Electro character. Tartaglia, who's played with Xiangling Bennett. Hu Tao, who could be argued as her core being her plus Jingzhou, or you could say it's her plus double Hydro core. Raiden, who's is a Bennett Xiangling character, or a Sara Kazuha character. And then there's Wanderer. The most common flex characters you will run into are Jingzhou, Kazuha, and sometimes Zhongli. There are a couple things these characters offer. Specifically, Jingzhou gives you damage reduction, interruption resist, Hydro Wrap, damage, and the healing. He also generates Hydro Particles. Kazuha is grouping, resistance, damage percent bonus, and transformative reactions. Examples of reactions are Electrocharge and Aggravate, which can both be triggered by swirls, making Kazuha do quite a lot of damage in those teams. Zhongli is very commonly played for his shields. There are a couple other significant flex characters that I want to mention. Primarily Bennett. I do want to explain that Bennett is primarily constrained to teams that have Pyro Resonance. It is not very common to play Bennett outside of double Pyro team. Whether that be Xiangling or a Pyro carrier like D-Luke, it's just not very common. Fischl is an Electro character who generates Electro Particles and is very great with other Electro characters or in Electrocharge comps. Kogomi is a healer alternative to Jingzhou, and can be better in some cases because of her support capability and roll compression. Freeze. Sucrose can be used in place of Kazuha as a buffer for vaporize reactions, aggravate, or she could be a transformative reaction trigger for stuff like Hyper Bloom or Electrocharge. Nihida is currently the premier Dendro character. She also provides EM up to 250. Uki is a Electro healer who applies Electro. Toma is a Pyro, actually a very similar slot to Bennett. He gives you damage percent on normal charge stacks at C6 and plunges. Is half Pyro Resonance, etc. There are a couple ideal reactions that elements really want at this moment in time. This is entirely subject to change based on what units release. This is kind of a vague guideline. Basically, all I'm saying is Vaporize is good. Unreacted comps are good. Electrocharged is really good. Hyper Bloom is really good too. And you can play Cryo if you want. Now, before we get into exactly team cores, we're going to talk about Resonance, because Resonance is a major part. Geo has no reaction. Resonance is a major part of defining the team cores because of how they are. And it's not because of the passive buffs. It's because of the unit synergies. You will always be playing Ayaka with a second cryo character. You will never not play Ayaka with a second cryo character because the energy generation, most of them have a support ability for Ayaka, i.e. Shenhe, or technically Ione is a healer, or Layla is a shielder. And in the case of Xingqiu, you're talking about application for actions. It can be the foundation of a team core. Here are a couple examples of the resonances. Resonance pairs. So, I've been talking about it a lot. The idea of this team core is it's a 2-character combo that you build your team around and play with a support and or carry of your choice. So a really good example of this is Double Hydro or even Xiangling Bennett. You could talk about Aya Rosaria as well. For Dendro teams, the core of Dendro teams is generally going to be Nahida and an Electro character. And then the other 2 slots are what changes. So there are a couple ways to build on top of these team cores. The first way you would do it is by combining 2 team cores to create your ideal reaction. So you can combine Double Pyro with Double Cryo and get a Reverse Melt comp, Double Hydro with Dendro Electro and get a Hyper Bloom comp, Animo Electro plus Double Hydro, or you combine Animo Electro with Dendro Electro and get an Aggravate comp. Does that make sense? Anyone have any questions about that? Okay. The other way you build on top is to add a complementary flex character or 2. So, Bennett Xiangling, we're generally going to be adding one of the most common flex characters, i.e. Xingqiu, and then a flex. So that can be Sucrose. Or if you're playing Wanderer or Farzan, you can add Bennett, because you want the attack buff for your Wanderer, who synergizes with Bennett, Homa. Homa synergizes with Bennett and Wanderer himself, making this a synergistic. Your reaction here is Pyro Swirl. Sucrose is giving you Pyro Swirl, Hydro Swirl, and Vaporize from the Xingqiu. The other way you can do it, instead of 2 flexes, is you add your on-fielder. Your on-fielder is effectively a flex, but there's emphasis on them because they're the character taking most of the field. This is where the example of, you can argue Hu Tao Xingqiu being the core instead of Double Hydro here doesn't really matter, it's semantics. So you could play Hu Tao with Double Hydro, and then you flex in anyone you want from our list up here. The reason I have it labeled as anyone is because there's technically no best in slot 4th team. And then we can also go for the example of international. You are playing Bennett Xiangling, you are using Kazuo as your flex, and you're using Tartaglia so you get your reaction. And you have your on-fielder, who is also doing a significant amount of damage with his burst. Now, something I will talk about is teams will want to have a defensive character. The ideal slot for your defensive character reduces the damage loss as much as possible. You want them to be as non-intrusive as you can. They will generally want a support weapon or a support set, or they are forming an additional value for you, such as energy generation or elemental application. So in the case of Hyper Bloom, you're going to really like Shinobu, because you get more Dendrop from Nahida than Yao Yao, and you're getting the similar Hyper Bloom triggers from Shinobu compared to Raiden. So this is an example of ideal role compression. Going back to Shinobu again, here's a bit more of an obvious example. The value that Kazuha brings here far outweighs what Fischl does far outweighs what Fischl does with Jean. That is an undesirable synergy, or undesirable role compression. Something else you could do here, if you do want Fischl and you still need a healer, you could replace Jincho or Yelan with Kokomi. Or even, I would use Kokomi. Some characters have built-in defensive utility, which means you may not always require a defensive slot for your team. That is subjective and up to you. I am just stating that some characters have an easier time doing this than others. Examples are characters with interruption resist, damage reduction, passive healing, large EHP pools or literal HP pools, grouping and or crowd control. So examples of this is when enemies are sucked in, they are staggered and are not likely to hit you. Or Prototype Amber, which provides active healing. When you are playing these teams, you want to focus on creating rotations that maximize your energy generation, buff up time, sync up your cooldowns, and facilitate your ideal action. So you want a Hydro Aura before your Pyro character comes on field. Ape. And you don't want Yelan's uptime to end early. One major example of this is that you're able to optimize the Yelan rotations to fit in a second E. You can see we did one Yelan E, here comes the second one. Okay, and now we're not going to lose waves on the Hu Tao. That is a crafted rotation. The example for international is we're setting up with Tartaglia's kill, and then swiping, then Venom bursting, and then you're applying Animo, 2U Animo to wipe that Hydro and apply Pyro on the first tick of Kazuha's burst. And then he is swirling Pyro on the next E skill, or when the burst ticked. So swirl setups can be part of rotation, as well as just general. And that's kind of everything I've got, actually. Yeah, that's the gist. That's how you build a team against an Impact.